All right. So Paul Lesko has officially joined us. I have deemed you the hobby's lawyer. I haven't seen that in writing anywhere, but I'm just going to go ahead and start calling you that. You're also the writer of Law of Cards. You are a lawyer. Is that not correct, Paul Lesko?
That's correct. I've been a lawyer since 1999, card collector since the 80s, but really jumped back into it in the 2000s and had a background in intellectual property litigation. So since there's a lot of intellectual property with cards, I decided that would be what I collect cards involved in lawsuits. But then I also, being a lawyer, I like to write. So I decided to write about every single lawsuit that there is in the industry. And there happens to be a lot, and it's fun to do.
Maybe we can get a little history too before we get started. But I am curious just to test how much you are into the hobby.
Did you dress up for Paul today? I noticed this button-up shirt, by the way.
You think this Hawaiian shirt's dressing up for Paul?
You usually look like a slouch in here. Yeah, I'm just asking. Did you wear that because you knew there was a
legal? I am very impressed. Thank you.
I knew there was a lawyer coming on, and I knew I would eventually need legal counsel.
Half?
And so
what are you wearing on your bottom?
I'm wearing shorts.
Basketball shorts? I'm just curious.
They're stretchy, comfortable shorts. What are you wearing, Paul? You wearing anything good?
T-shirt and shorts.
Whoo, baby.
All right. Now we know.
Now we know that.
Caught my attention.
What do you collect? Specifically, what's in your collection? I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, mainly what I focus on now is cards that are involved in lawsuits. So whenever there's a lawsuit involving cards, I go out and track down the cards, which normally is pretty easy because a lot of times I'm just tracking down counterfeit cards. But sometimes you get some high dollar value cards that I will probably never get into my collection. I mean, there's that there's that LeBron RPA out there, and that's so. If I obey the rules, that's something I'm going to have to get at some point.
No,
it's well out of my price range.
I was going to say, I think even though that has so much, negative new press around it, it's still so expensive. I guess maybe because there are other guys like yourself. That's a nice hobby. It's kind of like how Rob over at Burbank only collects players of really weird names, even though he's been in the hobby for years. All right, so let's get into this a little bit. This is not the first, as you've alluded to, not the first lawsuit in the sports card world, but obviously this is big news. Is this the first, when Panini came out with their lawsuit against Fanatics, was that the first antitrust lawsuit, or have there been others to your knowledge?
There's been others. One of the seminal ones was Fleer versus Topps way back decades ago, where
was that late '80s, Paul?
Challenging. I'm sorry.
Was that the late '80s?
That is.
Okay.
That is. So it's been a while for that. And so there's been a lot of antitrust lawsuits, not a lot, but there's been multiple antitrust lawsuits. But everything seemed to be well sorted because if you guys collected in the 80s like I did, I mean, there was non-exclusive licenses everywhere. I have Donruss, Fleer, Topps, all with team uniforms on. It's only within the last 10 years or so that exclusives have really come back into the fold and limited how many cards you can get or from who you can get cards with uniforms on it. So it's been 20, 30 years since the last stab at an antitrust lawsuit. I take that back. Actually, Leaf was involved in an antitrust lawsuit against Upper Deck over their hockey exclusive.
Oh, really?
That was about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, but that's settled. So we never really got any finality in that one.
How have they generally played? Like, say the Topps one back in the 80s. How did that end up playing out? Were they found guilty of being monopolistic or having those tendencies?
It's one of those lawsuits that went back and forth with the FTC saying something and the court saying something else, and it ended up ultimately just settling. But the focus there was that since Topps was selling cards with gum in it, that other manufacturers just selling cards by themselves basically was okay. So it was really kind of a punt more than anything else.
Okay, so flash forward to today, we see let's say actually, I guess this was Thursday of last week, we saw the Panini lawsuit against Fanatics claiming antitrust. They're trying to be a monopoly in the hobby. You've now had some time to review the initial documents. What's your take on what you've read and found out so far?
So, starting with just that lawsuit, and that isn't actually the first lawsuit between Panini and Fanatics. Panini actually sued Fanatics in May, alleging that Fanatics was unlawfully stealing their employees.
That's right.
About 36, 37 employees from Panini ended up going to work for Fanatics. So that lawsuit had been percolating for a little bit. Then this antitrust lawsuit that Panini filed basically says, hey, they've got or will have all the exclusives here, and because of that, that's bad for competition. And that's one of the things that needs to be focused on for an antitrust lawsuit. You're not really looking at how does this hurt the other companies. It's, does it affect competition? Is it making, for the collectors, is it making products cost more? Is it a lessening of quality? Is there some impact with collectors that having a monopoly on top is bad? Because just having a market power doesn't necessarily mean you're an unlawful monopoly. You have to have some bad effect when it comes down to the consumer level.
Okay.
So with this lawsuit, that's what Panini's alleging, is that once Fanatics is in charge and has everything, nobody's going to be able to make anything else, and it's going to be problems for collectors. That's basically, it's an oversimplification of like a 50-page document, but that's
sure.
it.
You know what I was really disappointed about? It was like going back after reading some of the Fanatics one today and seeing there weren't flashy tweet pictures in their lawsuit like there was in the Fanatics one. That really helped to catch my millennial eye, but that's okay. We'll deal with. That's why you're here today. You're gonna dumb it down for us a little bit. So the Panini
that's actually a really good point, because I am a plaintiff's attorney, and I've been filing plaintiff's cases for like the last 15, 16 years. And I always try to do that, where you try to make a complaint, put as many pictures or images that you can in there, especially comparisons to show what happened here and what happened there, so that, because otherwise a judge or their law clerks, I mean, they're just people. If you see 80 pages of just words, at some point your eyes are going to glaze over. But if you break that up with images and things like what Fanatics did in their filing, it makes you more interested, because you see a pretty picture and you're like, what does that mean? And it keeps you reading. So,
okay.
So I really do, like you said, I do like the Fanatics filing better, because they did a better job of incorporating graphics and everything else.
That's funny. Okay, I'm glad to hear that that's actually a thing. The Panini lawsuit, if we go back to that for a second, so do you have any general takes on the arguments made by Panini? Like, do you think this would be able to stand up in court? Because, I noticed that this is a counter lawsuit from Fanatics. I didn't see anything about like a, request to dismiss these allegations, right out the gate. So what is your take there?
Sure. So the lawsuit that Panini filed, the antitrust lawsuit that Panini filed, that's in Florida. The Fanatics lawsuit that was just filed, that's in New York. And actually, it names Panini's Italian parent company, whereas the other lawsuit is Panini's U.S. company. So there's overlap, but there's not necessarily 100% overlap. You will likely see in Panini's antitrust lawsuit a motion to dismiss by Fanatics at some point. And that's really what I didn't think we would hear from Fanatics until that, for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, however long it takes. So, it was pretty surprising to see that Fanatics this quickly is not only filing a lawsuit, but in a lawsuit did a very good job of really just walking through Panini's antitrust complaint and shooting everything down. So I was as somebody who geeks out at the law, I was really happy to see that, because normally you don't. Normally a defendant in the case says as little as possible. We'll rest on our briefs. We'll let that happen. But Fanatics has taken more of a, hey, let's get all the information out there so that the public can see what's going on, and let them make their judgments too.
So with the fact that we know, like, the lawyer for Panini is associated with the Al Gore v. Bush case in the early 2000s, and like many other
Microsoft
prominent cases, do you think like this lawyer is good, competent for Panini, and then vice versa? Like, who is representing Fanatics? Are they well known, good for for their position?
Sure. And I think Panini did get a very good antitrust lawyer and a very good law firm. My only critique of their choice is I don't think their lawyers are as involved with collecting. And they made some mistakes in their complaint because of that. There's one instance where Panini is talking about the, when you have cards in a non-exclusive or cards when there's an exclusive license and you can't put trademarks on your cards, that you airbrush them out and you have what they call pajama cards. And they said pajama cards are not worth that much because nobody wants a card without a logo. But Panini has Panini Baseball.
Yeah.
And that's all pajama cards.
Right.
And they also mentioned, one way they can win that antitrust lawsuit is to show that under Fanatics, there will be a lessening of quality. And so they argued that they use their manufacturer, and they say that all their cards, when they get to the manufacturer, are in mint condition. And I'm like, no, they're not.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah,
so
okay.
It's like Panini, are you saying that everyone should be getting mint condition cards? Because, I mean, let's just contact BGS and PSA, and every time we get an 8 for one of those cards, send it back to Panini and send us back a 9. I mean, that's what they said.
Okay, yeah.
So they have good lawyers for Panini, but they don't necessarily know as much about the industry, so they might need to be handheld better.